guys, welcome back! When you talk about Yu Suzuki's work, everyone seems to only recall about Space Harrier, Afterburner, Outrun and the Hang-On series, but what about Enduro Racer? Why doesn't Enduro Racer receive the same praise and respect? Let's take a look! I've always been a fan of off-road related stuff, so when I first saw Enduro Racer at the arcades, my eyes just popped and I was immediately in love. Sadly, the cabinet where I used to play it was the stand-up version and not the sit-down replica bike similar to Hang-On. Besides the clock, we have to race against other drivers and the treacherous terrain that was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen till 1986. When we reach the second level, and besides enduro bikes, other vehicles will try to block our path, so from this point forward, the event is no longer an enduro race. It resembles a desert type of event, just like the Dakar. The same hardware from Hang-On and Space Harrier was used to create this far more exciting venture onto the off-road world of racing. Just like in Outrun, released in that same year, the races were no longer lifeless and flat. Instead, undulating tracks packed with dangers offered tons of excitement and adrenaline. Huge banks of dirt filled the track from side to side, and while approaching these, the best maneuver would be to pull back the handlebars before impact so that we could perform the perfect jump that would allow us to avoid all hazards hidden on the other side. This was the most important move to be victorious, and the continuous movement of pulling back the handlebars would turn every single one of us into a mighty wrestler. I even had to ask my friends to hold the cabinet steady, otherwise it would fall on me after a more violent maneuver. The arcade original was hard. It was indeed a very difficult game. The increasingly tight time limit, along with the faulty controls due to excessive pulling and harsh treatment, really prevented me to finish it. Gladly, it ended up ported a year later to a few 8-bit systems, and by then I was a proud and lucky owner of a ZX Spectrum 128K plus 2A. It was a system that I believe to have received the best home version of Enduro Racer. And that's probably why no one talks about this masterpiece by Yu Suzuki and his AM2 team. Sega's one and only home console effort for Enduro Racer was on the Master System also by 1987, and a truly bizarre attempt it was. This is a sort of paperboy on a motorcycle. What were they thinking? It's really hard to understand why they've changed the original arcade concept into this thing. Besides the Sinclair ZX Spectrum and the Sega Master System, Enduro Racer was also released for the Amstrad CPC, that was basically a slow Spectrum port, and the Commodore 64, by far the worst conversion of them all. Another port of the ZX Spectrum version was made by 1988 for Thomson's 8-bit line of computers introduced in France during the 80s. But again, it was a failed attempt. It ran even slower than its CPC counterpart. Enduro Racer was really needing a 16-bit conversion of the arcade original that eventually arrived also during 1988, but only for the Atari ST. It was a solid attempt from the same team that brought the ZX Spectrum version, fast and featuring the same iconic tune by David Whittaker. Back to Yu Suzuki's original design, it was truly unforgiving. Players wouldn't really stand a chance. Right in the first stage, there were a ton of rocks after the many jumps, and most of the ramps were positioned in bands, so it was common to overshoot the track, as we couldn't change the direction of the bike whilst in mid-air. And the second stage was even worse, with tighter bands, desert four-wheelers and random obstacles. Then the third stage introduced water jumps. This was without any doubt meticulously engineered to take our money. But as told in issue 64 of Computer and Video Games magazine back in February of '87, it was totally worth it. The feeling of riding a bike is tremendous. It's totally different in gameplay to hang on. Activision immediately grabbed the rights for the home computer versions of Enduro Racer, and they already knew who to call. Back in 1986, Giga Games approached Activision UK to show them their brand new racing game and ZX Spectrum exclusive Nightmare Rally. Oddly, Activision refused, and it ended up being picked by Ocean Software. So when the time came to produce the ZX Spectrum and Atari ST conversions of Enduro Racer, Activision handed the job over to Giga Games, whose previous work with Nightmare Rally showed to be extremely important for their next venture. For that, all they had as reference was a VHS tape of someone playing the arcade original, and as stated by Alan Laird in an interview a few years back, "I don't think I ever saw an Enduro Racer machine in real life." As told previously, the C64 port by Electric Dream Software was the worst of the bunch, receiving just 16% in issue 27 of Zap64 magazine. Electric Dreams wasn't pleased, so instead of just forgetting about it, there were reports about a new enhanced version of the game being developed and scheduled to be released on disc format only. That version never came out, but an unfinished game was mistakenly bundled with the Big Box 30 compilation by Bo Jolly. It seems that someone just made copies of the wrong master disc. As for the one and only console version of Enduro Racer, it was quite odd that Sega themselves opted not to adapt the arcade original. Instead, they created from scratch an isometric racer, offering a completely distinct experience. But that wasn't the end of it. If you're a die-hard fan of the Master System, the Japanese version of Enduro Racer for Sega's own Mark III console is the one that you should play, simply because it features a complete game with all 10 levels. For the Master System version, they opted for a smaller cart, which meant that 5 levels and other graphical details needed to be removed due to lack of space. Again, what were they thinking? Unlike all other Yu Suzuki creations, Enduro Racer is a totally forgotten title, with only the Master System version making an appearance on Wii's Virtual Console back in 2008. Sadly, never got a sequel also, but its spirit lived on in the arcade-exclusive Stadium Cross from 1992 brought by Sega AM1. So guys, this was my experience and historical facts around this Yu Suzuki creation that practically no one seems to care about. Maybe if it was included in Shenmue, its impact on gamers would have been slightly different. I recall organizing during summer vacations some ZX Spectrum championships and inviting a bunch of friends to participate, and Enduro Racer was one of those that would always be present. I really miss those days. People would sit around the good old Specky waiting for their turn to play. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of It's a Pixel Thing, so if you did, don't forget to smash that like button, to leave a comment with your own memories, to subscribe to the channel, and to click on that bell icon so that you're notified when all my future videos become available. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in my next video. Cheers!